software testing is necessary and required?
Well, you need software testing to ensure that software meets a client's requirements and standards. You need it to build confidence in the product as well, for the client and for the team that's building it, because the people who are working on the piece of software in question, they'll sleep better at night knowing that it's been rigorously tested and it won't crash and burn at the first gust of wind. You need it to catch defects in the software, and overall, you need it to prevent mishaps and unexpected behavior, which could cause, if you've got an e-commerce website, economic losses, or worse than economic losses if you're making weapon systems for fighter jets or something else.
Absolutely fantastic. So I don't think I need to add any more points because you have covered all of it. I mean, you have covered the quality. So we need to ensure the quality. We need to ensure whether it's fit for use, and we need to ensure that it meets the end users or the customer requirements. So with examples, you have covered that, which is absolutely fantastic. So very, very good answer on the necessity of the software testing. All right. What is the difference between alpha and beta testing?
Alpha testing is usually done by testers who are working for the organization that makes the software, whereas beta testing is usually performed by end users or the client. Alpha testing is done in a test environment, whereas beta testing is done in a real environment by real people, and the build is all set up as a complete product. When you get to beta testing, you expect you already have a pretty stable build and a functional, robust piece of software. And the goal of alpha testing is somehow to make sure that you have a functional and reliable product, whereas the goal of beta testing is to make sure that you have a good product.
Cool.
From the user's point of view.
Right. Okay. Can you give me some of the beta testing examples? Have you ever came across or done some beta testing?
I have not done any beta testing, no. But that would be okay. Well, if you're releasing a video game, for example, then you're gonna release a fairly bad version of it to a small number of people in an alpha phase. Based on their feedback, you would build a better build, a more stable build, which you would then release to a higher number of people. This is the beta testing phase,
Yeah.
and in this phase, you would be expecting to receive feedback on more than just the functional aspects of the game, but whether it's a smooth experience to use it and to navigate its user interface, and
Right. Yeah.
more than
So
functional aspects.
yeah, cool. So if you just say for example you notice around Gmail beta came out like a couple of years ago, and then there are applications which you many times use day to day that might pop up that beta testing notification, right? So I usually use a couple of applications enrolled, which I have registered. They keep pushing on the features to a set of customers. So if you opt for beta testing program, then they will send you the invite to go ahead and test it. There are many platforms, open source platform basically, or crowd testing platform, not open source, crowd testing platform where you'll find a lot of beta testing products and applications available. So UTest is one of that. So where they have a lot of applications wherein you do the actual testing, and then there are a lot of beta testing phases as well. So it's very usual. And if you just notice around, even in Gmail, you might find sometime that there are new features which are rolled out to any very specific people. In YouTube, they keep rolling out these features to a certain set of users, and they will ask you whether you want to be part of that. And then you basically, as a beta tester, you use those features and you provide the feedback accordingly. Okay, so your answer is absolutely correct. I'm just adding a few points there so that you just try to analyze a little bit around the market and add these points that, yes, I have seen something like that in this particular application, and add that in your answer. Okay, Cool. What is the difference between the positive and negative testing?
Positive testing ensures that the software works as expected, as far as the expected flow of information goes. So if you're validating register procedure, users registering an account on a website, then if you get an error, if once you click the register button you get an error, then the test fails. Whereas negative testing ensures that the software can handle invalid inputs and expected behavior. So for example, if the user that's registering left one of the required fields blank, rather than throwing an error at you, you just get a notification above the required field telling you that this needs to be filled in.
Right. So absolutely correct there. So in negative testing, you check the exception scenario, right? So whether the exceptions are handled gracefully or not. So you can just add this little line there. So you handle the exception, you test the exception scenarios, and if the exception scenarios are being gracefully handled in the application, as you mentioned, that you have a text field or you have a registration form, and in the registration form, there is a required field that you have left blank, and you click on register. So instead of crashing the overall application, it should gracefully pop up an error message that a particular mandatory field is blank, right? So that's basically the negative scenario. In the positive scenario, you know that these are the mandatory fields. I definitely need to fill in these, and after filling in these, I click on register, and user gets registered successfully. In the negative scenario, I'll think around a lot of negative scenarios, exception scenarios, and go further with them. And in case those exceptions are not handled gracefully, I'll log defects so that those defects can be fixed by the developers and they can be addressed basically, and they can implement the graceful mechanism for the exceptions. Okay, so answer is absolutely correct. I'm just elaborating it to make it more clear to you, and you can add more points to that, right? But in terms of your answer, it's absolutely correct. No issues with that. All right. So what are the different strategies of integration testing?
So you've got two main strategies, which is the Big Bang approach and the incremental approach. The incremental approach is further classified into bottom up, top down, and mixed.
Mm-hmm.
With the Big Bang approach, the system that you're testing is complete, which is to say all components and modules are grouped together and tested as a group. Whereas the incremental approach, depending on which one you're using, you're either starting off with the most basic elements and testing them rigorously, and you're adding more components and modules as you validate the behavior of the previous components.
Cool. Yeah. So Big Bang and incremental approach. In incremental, you have bottom up, top down, or combination of both. So these are some of the strategies. So absolutely correct there. And in terms of modules, we'll move on to more detail around this integration testing. So, and then I'll ask you bit details in the examples. So basically, I'll ask some of the examples if you can provide. What is top-down integration testing? Let's understand that first. So can you explain a little bit about top-down integration testing?
In top-down integration testing, higher level modules are tested first, and the lower level modules are tested later, which means that any big design flaws can be detected and fixed first. Whereas with bottom-up integration testing, you would find lower level errors and defects and correct those first. Top-down integration testing tends to make use of more stubs than bottom-up, and it really just depends on the system that you're working on and the team's preferences.
Okay, cool. So can you give me a little example?
As an example of top. Yeah. So say you had a human resources app or a website where you have different modules for each employee. So you have an employee for you have a module for adding employees. You have a module for adding qualifications for those employees, salaries, time off, vacation time, holiday entitlement, and you have a module, the main module, which would, let's say, recommend who the best person for the job is for some particular job, depending on how cost effective it would be, depending on their salaries and their qualifications. The best person to solve your you would in top down integration testing, you would first test the algorithm for figuring out who the best person for the job is, and then you would test whether you can add the employee, whether once you've added the employee you also can access that employee in a different module where you can add holiday entitlements or salary specifications or qualifications, etc.
Right. Yeah. So yes. So absolutely fine there. You can simplify this example with a simple web portal. Though, so say for example, in the top-down approach, you can say if you're building an e-commerce website, so you have the user interface which allows you to basically register. So you have the user interface which has the registration functionality, but the registration functionality is calling a service or a module which is not yet ready, right? So in that particular case, you can have the stub, which will provide you the relevant response when you register. So ensuring that registration is successful or not. So that your answer is also correct. No issues with that. But try to simplify a little bit so that it's easier for the person who's listening you to understand each and everything, because you never know the person who is actually interviewing you actually knows the amount of things that you know, right? So it's not necessary that a person who interviews a candidate knows everything. Okay, so that's the reality of the industry. So there are people who take first round, second round, and then you go further. So they have a standard set of template and questions. So if you match those template and questions, then it's all good. I'm not sure how the UK market works, but usually when I was in India, things were a bit different there. In Australia, it is completely different. So just have a bit of research how your local market is and try to simplify things as much as you can, because I don't think there is any person who wouldn't like to understand things in a simple way, right? If you can simplify complex thing, then you
simple
are
is always better.
yeah, absolutely fantastic. In that particular case, you will solve complex problem in a simple way, right? So that's a big value add that you will provide to the role and to the organization. Okay.